Growing for Market podcast.
What I often say to folks is health in a lot of ways is about complexity. You need a complex gut biome. You need a complex set of lots of different types of micronutrients. That's true for people. That's also true for plants, right? So plants are sending their roots out into the soil and they're asking for a complex bed of micronutrients. They need like organic, healthy, living soil. Most of the time what they get in conventional farming operations, unfortunately, is effectively industrial imitation soil. It's just pumped full of a handful of nutrients, and without those nutrients, it's completely, without that fertilizer, is completely incapable of supporting life. That's not soil. That's imitation soil. And when you grow plants in that kind of soil, you get imitation plants, and then you get imitation food, and then you get sort of a host of problems associated with that.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets, like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm April Parms Jones, your host and a writer for Growing for Market magazine. For 33 years, the magazine for flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait until you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people to find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Rimmel greenhouses are proudly built right here in America and shipped to anywhere in the U.S. With technical sales staff members located across the country, many with growing experience, the Rimmel Greenhouses team of experts will serve as your trusted partner every step of the way to ensure that you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit Rimmel.com to get a quote today. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food and connect with my customers, not to spend my time glued to a desk. If I could spend less time in spreadsheets and more time out in the field, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. With tools like custom websites, done-for-you newsletters, CSA member support, flyers and QR codes, customer billing, and more, Farmhand takes care of the admin so you can focus on what you love. And here's the best part. You can learn how it works directly from Farmhand founder Ari Memar. If you're a longtime listener of this podcast, you've probably heard Ari as a guest, sharing his expertise alongside inspiring success stories from the farmers he's helped. As both a hobby farmer and a tech expert, Ari understands your challenges firsthand. He spent years simplifying complex systems to make farming easier and more profitable for growers like you. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 to 10 hours a week. That's up to 10 extra hours to spend with your family, in the field, or simply taking a breather. In a complimentary one-to-one demo, Ari will share his wealth of knowledge and show you exactly how Farmhand can streamline your operations, grow your CSA, and help you stay competitive in today's market. Don't miss this opportunity to connect with someone who truly understands the challenges of small farms and has the tools to help you succeed. Book your complimentary demo today at farmhand.partners/GFM. That's farmhand.partners/GFM. We all know that to a farm of any size, your soil is your most steadfast partner, an asset worthy of investing in. Since 1972, Ohio Earth Food has been the go-to source for soil testing, consulting, as well as the highest performing and most cost-effective granular and liquid fertilizers, seed starting soils, foliar sprays, and disease and insect controls. All approved for use on organic farms. They deliver them right to your farm, too. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in their seed catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in the soil before you plant, and rest assured that your plants will have all of the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. These natural blends utilize compost, kelp, and humate and are low salt index safe for high tunnels. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com, now with branches in Ohio and Wisconsin. ohioearthfood.com.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm April Parms Jones, and today we have the pleasure of having Samuel Taylor of Long Table Pancakes. Long Table Pancakes is dedicated to leaving the world better than they found it, through regenerative agricultural practices to bring long-lasting nutrition and taste to you. Thank you so much for joining us today, Samuel.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
It's a special, special day. It's fall. I feel like fall and pancakes go together hand in hand. So I'm excited for this conversation.
We do call it pancake weather.
Pancake weather, exactly. Pancake weather. I like to make my pancakes with lard on the cast iron griddle.
That's pretty hardcore. I love that.
Yeah, it's my secret sauce to success every time. So, can you tell us about the history of your company?
Yeah, so I think you spoke to what we do really well. We source heirloom grains from regenerative farmers, and we want you to have the energy to get through your day. We want the planet to have the energy to sort of sustain the next generations. This is a good way of thinking about it. I call the company Long Table because I think the whole history of food really is the story of one long table, right? We hand it down from generation to generation. And at that table, we also sort of hand down our values and what we want the world to be like and what the world is in fact like. So it's a very long table indeed. When we say long table, we really mean it. It goes in both directions for many, many generations. I don't know, there's a lot of people out there in this sort of CPG food founder space who are like, I wanted to start a business and I saw a problem and I saw a solution and I started a business and I raised $1 million to do it. I'm not that. I just became a maniac who was obsessed with pancakes. And I was eating pancakes 5 days a week for about 2 years. And in the middle of that time, I was a professional actor working mostly in Shakespeare and puppetry and a little bit of circus. And at that time, I fell in love with an acrobat. And I badly wanted her to come over to my house, but we were working, because we were in the entertainment industry, we were working in the evenings. So I thought, what can I cook for you? I know I'm already a pancake maniac. So I sort of put a lot of energy into the pancake recipes to prepare for her coming over to brunch. And a very long story short, she and I gave out pancake mix as wedding favors, and we started a farmer's market stall. And really, that was what it was supposed to be. Other actors were waiting tables, tending bar. We had a farmer's market stall. And we had a kiddo during that time. Lindsay, my wife, she was 8 months pregnant and working the pancake griddle and loading up the tent and the gear, on Saturdays while I was doing matinee performances. But we had a child, and we had a little kid an 18-month-old kid when everything shut down in 2020. And the world was kind of freshly revealing itself as breakable every day. And I really had a kind of conversion moment where I decided that I was going to really go full time on Long Table and regenerative agriculture. And it occurred to me that my son, who was 18 months old then, was going to be 16 one day. And he was going to look at me and say, like, hey, Dad, you and your whole generation knew about climate change from the time you were kids. Did you do anything? And boy, I want to have a good answer for him when he asks that question. And so Long Table is my best shot at building something that is much bigger than myself and much bigger than any one household impact might be able to be. I really view regenerative agriculture as one of about 5 or 6 things that we really have to get right to hand down a livable world to the next generations. And I think there's a ton of people who have to do great work for that to go well. One small piece of that is that we have got to build brands that communicate that to people. And those brands have to be more successful and more profitable than their peers. And that's the way that we are going to gain imitators. That's the way that bigger players are going to take notice and sit up and say, hey, well, we got to get on this. Yeah, it puts us in an interesting kind of, I am more of a revolutionary at heart, but within that sort of framework, you really want to play towards the people who currently have the power. And in that sense, we are sort of trying to grow a little seed inside. I don't know what the metaphor is. We're trying to sort of split the foundations that were inside by growing something else from the inside out.
Absolutely. That's so, so important. And I loved what you talked about with family memories and the power of food to empower us and make us feel really great, but also to empower us to help our farmers and to help our environment. And then also eating closer to home, right? Eating heirloom grains that are here in our country and they're doing really well. And then we are able to get that nutrition. And so when we're thinking about like creating family memories, there's nothing like a beautiful pancake, especially like on the weekends, if you have time during the week. And what I loved about your product is that you had something for everyone. And I love that you had the gluten free because a lot of people are experiencing gluten allergies for one reason or another. And could you talk a little bit about, while we're creating our family memories, how people can choose which one is going to be the best for their family?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think for most families with kids, the popcorn flour is really going to be the crowd pleaser. And that's really unique. So there's a lot of people who take popcorn kernels and mill that into a very fine cornmeal. And that's sort of popcorn cornmeal, right? And that's very delicious and it's wonderful. We do it a little differently. We pop the corn and then we mill it into a flour. So it creates a really lightweight, really fluffy whole grain flour. And it creates a fluffier, lighter sort of whole grain cake than really anything else that's out there. That's the one that I really had to crack before I felt good about inviting Lindsay over for brunch. And that's very much in the kind of brunchy lane. It's a crowd pleaser. It's a hit. It's all of them are a high fiber, whole grain, high protein pancakes. But that's the one that really tastes like a treat. In a very kind of completely different lane is my personal favorite, which is the blue corn mix. That's blue corn, dark danko rye, buckwheat, hazelnut meal. And that's very much in the like lumberjack lane. So if you like your pancakes to be a little less fluffy, but still very tender, if you want to feel like you are going to go out and hike a mountain, that's the one. Interestingly, very popular with little kids. My nephew will eat an entire batch that's meant for 2 adults by himself, and he's 3. I hear that a lot. The gluten-free, we didn't launch with the gluten-free, and a lot of our customers who buy it aren't even gluten-free themselves. It's my wife's favorite. We eat a lot of bread in our house. That's her favorite. That's more like a sort of straight down the middle diner cake, if a diner cake sort of grew up and got a glow up. And one of the reasons why I love having it for people who are not gluten-free is that even if you are not gluten-free, you probably know somebody who is. Pancakes are such a social food. Like, we make it for other people. And so it's really great to have in the pantry, even if it's not your first go-to, as a way of like, my roommate doesn't eat gluten, but we still have pancakes together. Yeah, and that one, a lot of gluten-free pancakes, unfortunately, are dictated by sort of the market pricing, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to be as cheap as possible. And so they use a lot of rice flour, which has great uses. Pancakes is not one of them. It's just very cheap. And they use a lot of xanthan gum to sort of create structure in the pancake. We don't do that. We use potato starch, which is an old Southern diner trick to make fluffier pancakes, and heirloom sorghum flour primarily. There's a little bit of teff seeds in there for crunch and pop, which is an ancient grain originally from the sort of Ethiopia region. Ours is grown in Idaho. Yeah, they're all delightful. But the simplest breakdown is the popcorn is for brunch, the blue corn is for lumberjacks, and the gluten-free is for everybody.
All right, good to know. Yeah, I haven't tried it yet, but I think I've tried the popcorn, but I haven't tried the lumberjack one yet. But I think I'll love it because I'm actually growing out Ohio blue corn.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it does really well. It's a really good native crop, and it's a crop of Ohio, so I love it, along with the pawpaw. I love the pawpaws. And I love a buckwheat pancake. Growing up, I would eat buckwheat pancakes. It was very cultural on Saturday morning, and I just love the taste and the wheatiness and kind of like the, I don't know, it's a little sour, a little sweet, and it really has a lot more fiber. And so I love that you talked about the heirloom grains. A lot of our audience grows heirloom grains in a smaller amount, like a smaller farmers. And I personally love an heirloom grain. And can you tell me why you decided to choose heirloom versus like a commercial grain?
Absolutely. I mean, I got into heirloom grains just as a cook. There's a wider variety of flavors and a more interesting life to lead if you're eating heirloom grains. You know, when you eat pancakes 5 days a week for 2 years, you really start to appreciate variety. And heirloom grains have a variety and a depth of flavor that conventional grains just can't match. And it was only later that I really started to understand what kind of drove that in the industry. And I feel like grains have gotten a really bad reputation among a lot of people, particularly in the United States in the last 10 years or so. And in some ways, I think it's earned that poor reputation because a lot of grains out there really are kind of garbage. Like they're grown for yield per acre over everything else. And maybe second to that is the speed with which wheat in particular, can be turned from a flour into bread. And for that, you need a very particular type of gluten. You need it to be extremely robust and strong. Whereas most bread was fermented and the gluten developed, which is what provides bread its structure, over many, many hours. And so we're essentially dealing with a huge, most of the bread in this country is like made too fast. It's not hydrated enough and it's supercharged with one element. It's like, that's not the superfood that our ancestors lived on. If your ancestors come from a part of the world with grains. So when you return to heirloom grains that are a little harder to grow because they're not artificially supercharged for yield, you return to the kinds of foods that really have much greater depth, much greater nutritional value, and frankly are just more fun. You got more to deal with than just one set of flavors. And that flavor itself has been, frankly, kind of watered down. Like even the heirloom wheats out there. Like I don't want to badmouth wheat. I love wheat. We used to turkey red wheat for a really straight down the middle sort of farmhouse style pancake. With just one grain from one farm. We featured the story of that farm. But it was just turkey red wheat. It was grown on farm, milled on farms, so Meadowlark Farms in Wisconsin. It was incredible. And it blew people's minds because they were like, whoa, I didn't know pancakes could be like this. And it's like, yeah, that's what yield per acre cheated us of.
Yeah.
That's what it robbed us of.
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
I am so excited to welcome Bootstrap Farmer as a sponsor of the podcast. I've known them for a dozen years, and if anyone tells you nothing is made in the USA anymore, well, they're headquartered and warehoused in Paris, Texas. They make their own all-metal, all-inclusive greenhouse frames of steel made in the USA and fabricated in Texas, and their heavy-duty, reusable propagation and microgreens trays are Midwest-made. With a complete range of supplies, they have just about everything for propagation and growing, including heat mats, ground cover, frost blankets, silage tarps, irrigation, and trellising. Want to color code your seed starting flats? They've got heavy-duty trays that will last for years in a full range of colors, great for keeping farm seedlings separate from retail or just for fun. And they have an experienced team of growers to support everything they sell. If you've heard of the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative providing grants for hoop houses, but have been put off by the paperwork, Bootstrap Farmer has a guide that will walk you through the application process so you can get your hoop house funded this winter. For all that and more, check out Bootstrap Farmer at bootstrapfarmer.com. Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS two-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing to making raised beds with a rotary plow to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying two-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer.
And now, back to the show. I'm from Ohio, and so I went down to Amish country. We have the Amish in Ohio, which are very exciting and wonderful. Great cultural tradition. And I went to an animal auction. I'm on the market for a goat to get processed. And so I was like, I'm going to go see what the goats look like, if they look healthy at the auction, the price point, which is very important to me. So we went, my partner and I, his name is also Samuel, we went to the auction and he was kind enough to drive me down. And the goats were so beautiful and so stunning and so wonderful. And a little baby goat went for $10. So cute. It was all white, fluffy, beautiful. I was like, oh, we need to get a goat. But we live in the city, and so it's not possible. So, but my point is, we had beautiful, delicious rabbit that was grown locally in the community of the Amish, and it was barbecue chicken. And I normally don't eat rabbit, but it was really like high protein, really great nutrients, and it kept me all day long compared to like a commercial chicken in the grocery store. And so that definitely connects directly to what you're saying, is that when we eat locally, things that are grown in our community, grown culturally with love, it really makes a difference on our bodies, and our bodies can tell and we feel better.
I think so. I mean, one of the things that every one of the farmers I work with will talk, I mean, if you start them talking, they won't stop, which is awesome, is about soil and soil health, right? So the way I often talk, and oftentimes I view my job as taking what that farmer is saying over the course of a 45-minute conversation and trying to make that something that a person can grasp a little bit in an Instagram post, right? Like that's the role of the brand in communicating from farm to consumer, right? And what I often say to folks is health in a lot of ways is about complexity. You need a complex gut biome. You need a complex set of lots of different types of micronutrients. That's true for people. That's also true for plants, right? So plants are sending their roots out into the soil and they're asking for a complex bed of micronutrients. They need like organic, healthy, living soil. Most of the time what they get in conventional farming operations, unfortunately, is effectively industrial imitation soil. It's just pumped full of a handful of nutrients, and without those nutrients, it's completely, without that fertilizer, is completely incapable of supporting life. That's not soil. That's imitation soil. And when you grow plants in that kind of soil, you get imitation plants, and then you get imitation food, and then you get sort of a host of problems associated with that. So nobody grows that way as a sort of proud cultural local practice, right? I think the farmers that I've spoken to who have a history of growing that way are saying like, I don't want to have to wear a hazmat suit to go fertilize and spray my crops and then have to strip that off and shower before I can hug my kids. Like, they don't want to do it that way. They do it that way because that's where there's a market for it. That's what they can afford to do. But when you have a tradition local to you that is people who are growing things really in a way that they are proud of and in a way that they love and in a way is sort of holistically integrated into a community and a life, there's all sorts of benefits that come with that. And that's to see farmers who are getting to work that way and who are part of a sort of a movement to not only keep alive the sort of organic tradition, but to really move farms to the center of a conversation about food. To be a part of that conversation, even a little bit, is such a huge honor to me.
Absolutely. It is such great work because you are working with the soil, you're working with the land, you're working with cultural traditions. And then you're also working with like familial or cultural legacy of memories with food. And what I love about food is that it always gives you like love and acceptance and caring. And then it also gives you memories that keep you going through difficult times, even the happy times. You really have a grounding and a foundation that you can remember that beautiful, delicious buckwheat pancake. And you're like, I too can make it another day to make my own delicious buckwheat pancake. And so that's really the legacy of food. Just the last podcast, I had Leah Penniman in upstate New York and of Soulfire Farm, and she was talking all about soil and the soil health and ways to increase your soil and make it more wonderful and delicious and healthy for your plants. So yeah, that's a really important point, thinking about our own soil health in our own communities and how we can support our soil by supporting companies and products that are a part of that soil health wellness, for sure.
Yeah, I think the conversation is clear to a lot of people about pasture-raised eggs, right? Like, it's really obvious the difference between a factory egg and a pasture-raised egg, right? They have a different color, they have a different texture, they cook differently, they taste very differently. And the reason why those eggs are that way is because the chicken's out there eating a complex natural diet, right? The same is true for plants, right? When you have something that is grown in that sort of natural soil, it's going to have a lot more flavor. It's going to have a lot more going for it than a thing which is fed on nitrogen and potassium.
Absolutely. And I think about when we're thinking about the future is that people are always trying to find like healthy foods that they can feed their children that will keep them, healthy and strong and robust and not wild and happy and content.
Yeah.
And so Long Table really is fitting that need for parents because you're giving them really high quality, high fiber, high protein, high nutrients that they can eat. You can put a pancake, put it in a little bag and carry it with you, right? And it's easy to just pop out and be like, here's a pancake. And then also parents have the option to control the sugar content. Like you don't have to add maple syrup or honey. You could do an apple butter or your own homemade jam that's low sugar. And so it allows parents to be creative, but still have the option of feeding their kids something that's really healthy and delicious for sure.
So I'll tell you 3 of my favorite pieces of feedback that we get all the time from customers. One is I don't get a pancake coma when I eat these, which is obviously the pancake coma is not a medical condition. That is the condition where you eat a lot of pancakes and then you're very full and then you're very sleepy. And then 20 minutes later, honestly, you're pretty hungry again.
Yeah.
These don't do that. And it's because they're really nutrient dense. That's one of the fun things that I hear. One of the other fun things that I hear is that like my kids don't even want maple syrup on these because they come with their own flavors. They're not really just a vehicle for syrup. And the other really fun thing that we hear a lot is that people pack them in kids' lunches, which is very cool. It's like people are making sandwiches with pancake bread and putting those in kids' lunches. And then the kids are sort of delighted to be eating pancake sandwiches. And there's a lot more going on nutritionally in that kind of a sandwich than there is in sort of a white bread sandwich that might otherwise make it in there. So I feel really honored to be a part of how people take care of their families. So you were speaking earlier to stories that people have about food. One of the other things that we hear from customers a lot is I've been making these every Christmas morning for 5 years. And that's just so huge to me, whether you celebrate Christmas or not or whatever, but for that family who does, it's such a huge honor to be a part of that kind of memory and to help people sort of create that joy among their families is huge for me.
Absolutely. And while we're thinking about kids and families, I also want to mention your social media I'm a social media subscriber and it's so good. I love it. I love the ways that you bring all the ideas of pancakes and just your product to customers.
Well, let's give a big shout out to Allison, please. Allison is our social media mastermind and brand manager. And as is probably obvious from interviewing me, I tend to talk too much and too long and give very long answers to very short questions.
No.
Allison is very skilled at taking all of that and making that sort of friendly to scrolling speed, so to speak. And I'm a huge admirer of her work.
Absolutely.
Shout out to Allison.
She does an amazing job. You guys have really interesting, fun content that I'm always like, oh, I never thought about using the product in that way. And then I love the lighting is perfect, and I just love it all.
Don't sleep on those recipes. Those recipes are really, really lovely. There's a pumpkin bread that uses the blue corn pancake mix as a base that will absolutely blow your hair back. I did that one last year. It's getting to be season for that again.
Absolutely. I just made pumpkin pie from Ohio pumpkins, which I love. I went down to Southern Ohio near Athens for the Paw Paw Festival. And then I also stopped off at a farmer's market and I got 2 medium pumpkin pies, which I put on the porch, but then I was like, I'm gonna have to eat you. So I took one off the porch and I baked it. Oh my gosh, it was so delicious. I was like so shocked. Our pumpkins in Northeast Ohio, I bought little small pumpkin pie pumpkins, but it's just mostly seeds, not much pumpkin. So you got to go to the good sources. And so I got a good pumpkin and I made a beautiful, delicious pumpkin pie. My partner loved it. And yeah, there's nothing like pumpkin bread, pumpkin pie, pumpkin power. It's the season. I love it.
Gotta worship the pumpkin.
Exactly, in the fall time. So that's awesome. So you're creating family memories. And then you mentioned also talking about climate. So we all are seeing the vast devastation that's happening in the southeast of our country with the hurricanes and how our hurricane seasons can go from like a 1 to a 4 overnight and then hit areas more inland than they've ever done before. And so you're talking about how when we're eating regeneratively, connecting back to the land, working with our heirloom grains, it really helps our soil health and it helps to mitigate these climate issues that we all are facing now.
Yeah, there's a few ways in which it does that. And really, my moment when I decided I was going to really dedicate years and years of my life to trying to build a brand based around regenerative agriculture was a very simple realization in a way, which is that most industries are trying to figure out how to do just a little bit less harm to the planet and to the people who are going to have to live here next, right? And to the planet they will live on. And that's good work, and that work needs to be done. Agriculture is very different because it is plants, plants are carbon-based life forms. We can actually flip it. If we do it right, we can take vast amounts of land and we can flip it so it's not just doing less harm, it's actually becoming a carbon sink. It's pulling carbon out of the air, putting it back where it belongs in the soil. And once it's in the soil, it does all kinds of different good. And so that is the most direct way in which regenerative agriculture combats climate change is you take farming practices which used to release carbon into the air, and it's a complex conversation about how it does that, and there's a variety of different ways. It's not one thing, but it pulls it out of the air and it puts it where it belongs, in the ground and in plants. But it also does a host of other things that mitigate and heal some of the damage that climate change does in other complex ways. So, for example, water retention, right? Like industrial imitation soil is really poor at retaining water. And because it doesn't have a sort of rich structure of biological life that's ready to drink that water in and suck it down into the earth. What instead happens is you get climate change causing weather patterns to change so that that region is not used to, whether it's a drought or whether it's more water than they've had before. The land is not accustomed to that type of water. It's not shaped for it. And so what you get with soil that can't absorb water is you get floods. It's not complicated. You know, we had stretches of, I think 30 miles of highway get washed away in a flood here in Illinois, maybe last summer. Destroyed huge amounts of crops, really like ruined people's houses. It's not an abstract issue. If the farmland around that area had been able to retain water, those people's houses wouldn't have been wrecked. It's a very direct issue. And then, along with that, what you wind up with when you've got all sorts of fertilizer and pesticides sitting on the surface of the land, when you get that, all of that washes into the waterways that then feed into the water that we're drinking. So you've got huge problems, particularly in rural communities in America, with chemicals in the drinking water supply. That's not an abstract issue. That's not climate change tomorrow. It's not a first order effect of climate change, right? That's not, oh, it's warmer. It's warmer. And so the water patterns, the rain patterns have changed. And so we're getting flooding. And so now I have to worry about nitrogen in my kids' water at the drinking fountain at school. That's crazy. And so where other industries are working towards doing less harm and doing less damage, we just have such a unique opportunity in agriculture to be one of the only things we can do, honestly, to flip everything from a negative to a positive. And if we can do that properly, if we can do that right, it's just so rare in like a world that is constantly on fire and breaking apart to be able to do something useful. It's so worth doing. It's so joyful to me to get to be a part of that. I don't want to oversell it. Like there's other huge things we got to get right. Like, the energy industry and the fossil fuel industry has like got to completely transform if we're going to do things, if we're going to have grateful great grandchildren. It's certainly not a silver bullet for fixing things, but it is one of several things that we can do. And it's frankly the most joyful, I find, of the things that we can do.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. You have to find joy in challenging times and through adversity. And I feel as if people do have a lot of climate anxiety and they feel as if there's not a lot that they can do within their own capacity. They feel a little disenfranchised about it. But like you're saying, there is power. People always have power and opportunity to invoke their power. And one of those ways is growing regeneratively and then supporting companies like yourself, Long Table, who are committed to regenerative practices. And so if we all take small steps.
If I may, I would love to give anyone who's listening who doesn't have the power to grow things or purchase things at large scale, I just want to sort of lay out what your power right now is in an emerging movement, right? There's not a lot of people in the world right now who know about regenerative agriculture, but the grocery industry knows about it, and they're getting hip to it, and they're getting hip to the fact that this might be profitable. And so grocery buyers are really watching what consumers are buying. And they're noticing that regenerative agriculture brands are starting to do better than their competitors, right? And so they're putting more shelf space towards that. And so when you, as a consumer, are buying one thing or another, and you see a regenerative claim or a brand that is really doing the work to do that behind the scenes, or you see a certification, you choosing that thing over a different thing right now has a huge impact because it clears the way for more of those types of things to show up on shelf. And when more of those things start to show up on shelf, bigger players are going to start to notice. General Mills is going to get in on the action. You know what I mean? And so when they do that, that filters down to thousands and thousands of acres. So it might feel like a really small thing to choose one thing over another at the grocery store in the 3 seconds you have to do that before your 4-year-old totally flips out in the grocery cart or whatever. I totally get it. But the more of that you can do, I can't overstate the degree to which we are sort of flirting with a tipping point as an industry where it's either going to really take off or it's going to have been a fad. And if you can be a part of making sure that the industry players there get the right signal, then there's a critical mass at which it starts to roll downhill.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. So, speaking of customers and customer happiness, I ordered online and it came so quickly. I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like hopeful I could get it in time. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was talking to my mother, like, I hope it comes. And then she's like, it arrived. And I was like, oh, that was so quick. It was like 3 days. I was shocked. So,
yes, we have very rapid shipping.
yes, very, very rapid shipping. So that gave me a little bit of joy.
We do have very rapid shipping. It is also carbon offset.
Okay. Awesome. That's great.
So a portion of all proceeds from our online store go towards reforestation projects, soil capture projects in grasslands, actually, which is a big one here in the prairie states.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was brought me a lot of joy. I was like, long tables arrived. And you could just open the box, and then it was just very fun. So we talked a little bit about creating the mixtures, and like, how were you inspired with the different options for each batch? And are you going to have more in the future, or like, could you talk a little bit about creating the mixtures? You don't have to give us the secret sauce, but just kind of like an overview of how do you come up? Is there inspiration? Did you read something? Was it something in a dream?
I made pancakes 5 days a week for 2 years.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I had a lot of experiments. I think we've got them somewhere in the storage unit that is becoming a brand museum. I think there's 5 or 6 different yellow legal pads of different recipes that I made during that time, long before I ever thought I would start a business. And after that, I started sort of tinkering with those recipes further and further. So it's just a huge amount of pancake eating.
Yeah.
It's really where the recipes came from. And as far as other ones, yes, there will be more. And we try to do 3 or 4 a year that really feature one heirloom grain from one farm. And we go to that farm, we interview the farmer, we take a photographer out to the farm. We really try to tell the story of, why are you farming this way? What are you growing? What's special about this grain? And then we sell that in a short burst, and those sell out pretty quickly. There's a huge demand for those. A lot of our customers really want to leap on that on the day that it launches. So don't sleep on that. Sign up for the email newsletter. It's the first place those always drop. And I hope one day to have products in other categories and sort of categories. What a boring industry word. Other types of food. Other types of food for you to eat in other different types of ways, because the amount of things that we can and should be making with regeneratively grown heirloom grains is just, it's so many things. So I look forward to a day when we can really branch out.
Absolutely. And I love the farmer story that you talked about, Meadowlark in Wisconsin and the red wheat.
That John and Haley Webking, yeah, they're such fascinating people. They were chefs in New York City. Hallie was a dancer. They decided to sort of move back to Wisconsin, where John was from, and they decided to farm. And they were there for a little while, and then, of all things, Hallie found a farmer who didn't have any kids, who's on Craigslist saying, "I'm looking for people to take over my farm one day." And so from this Craigslist ad, she wound up getting to know a real sort of farming legend in the area named Paul Bickford, who was doing organic farming really long before there was a certification or label for it, and one of the first people to sort of really move in the industry. And they're now running this biodiverse farm. They're starting to incorporate livestock. They've got a 7-year crop rotation, which is all about building complex soil health. They're just really fascinating people, and they're providing good jobs to a bunch of people in the community, where that's really pretty rare. And I always try to ask farmers when I go to their farms, like, it's so much work to farm this way. It's so complex to farm this way. So much simpler to take corn and soy subsidies from the government and spray. Why do you do it this way? And to watch this couple sort of tear up and talk about how the community that John came from in the last 30 years has really been hollowed out, and there's not a lot of jobs, and there's not a lot of jobs where you feel a sense of meaning, where you go to work every day. Or there's not enough. I shouldn't say there's not a lot. There's not enough. And so for them to be able to provide those kinds of jobs in his home community, providing that kind of healthy food to people, being part of a sort of planet helping movement, but much more locally, to pay the health insurance of these people and their kids, and they're all in the same school together, is huge. And I'm one tiny part of who they sell to, and it's not like I don't want to front like that's my story, right? That's their story. I'm just really pleased as punch to get to help tell it.
Absolutely. I think that's what this movement is all about, and supporting our local businesses, our local agriculture, and our local communities. And I think, especially after COVID-19, we saw how much our supply chain can be disrupted, especially internationally. And so I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal about how more companies in the States are working with our own people and our own neighbors and saying, hey, neighbor, do you have this resource that I need to help build my product and build my business? And it seems like, oh, it's just like about friendship, but it's really about sound business practices, because you can't always reach Wisconsin from where you are, and it's accessible, and you can go see them, they can see you, you can call them. And there's just so much more cross-cultural connections, right? Of way of life, a way of business. And it's more stable and resilient and much more reliable. And that allows us to all thrive and do better economically. And it's so important for us to economically support each other through business.
And there's some crucial points that are delicious for you as a person listening to support and be a part of. One of them is local bakeries. So local bakeries are frequently sourcing from their local mills, and the local mills are sourcing from the local farms. So if we're not available on shelf near you, or if the grocery store near you doesn't have sort of local brands that they're carrying, the local bakery is a great sort of re-emerging community hub that is supporting that, whether they're being loud about it or not. Oftentimes local bakeries are doing that without even really talking about it. If you're a baker, your local stone mill or your local flour mill, there's very frequently somebody near you. There wasn't for years and years, and they're starting to reemerge all over the country, which is amazing. That is such a great place to support, because you're buying your flour from those places is a really meaningful market for those mills. And as those mills develop, they are the piece that unlocks the ability of other players to really engage with those farmers who are growing locally and selling locally. They're like just such a critical hinge in the industry. And so anyone who buys from them, or any consumer who buys directly from those mills, the impact you have on the industry and the availability of local grains to you is very large right there. So that's a plug for your local baker and your local mill.
Yes, I love it all. I love it. So, as you're thinking about creating this love inspired food with Long Table, how can people reach out to your business? I personally went online, I ordered, it was very simple and easy, and it came very quickly. But what are the ways people can reach out, learn more about your business?
Yeah, it's great. We're at Long Table Pancakes on Instagram. That's a great way to get involved, to see recipes. We talk a lot about soil health on our social media and email list. longtablepancakes.com is the website URL. One thing I want to draw your attention to there is, if we're not on shelf near you, we have a store locator, obviously. But if we're not on a shelf near you, there's a form you can fill out to request at the grocery store level, like your local grocery store, where you would like to see us. And that has a huge impact on where we decide to expand to next. And that has a huge impact on grocery buyers. When they see that there's 6 people within 10 miles who requested us at a particular grocery store, why wouldn't they put us on shelf? That has a bigger impact than you know. So that's it. Instagram, website, and don't sleep on the store locator.
Awesome. I love the idea about the store locator. That empowers people to make their own decisions. Like, please, this is what I want. I want to have more of wonderfulness in my life, not less.
Oh, and if you live anywhere near a Fresh Time, we're in all Fresh Times.
Okay, Fresh Time. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate having you on and for taking the time to talk about Long Table and to expand our wonder and our love-inspired food. So thank you again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or review. It really helps others to find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business, operations, and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days, and you'll never get billed. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 per year. You'll get a year of the magazine plus 150 back issues from the last 15 years. Head over to Growing for Market and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers for farmers and Growing for Market magazine.